Welcome back to Made for More. I am your host, Holly J. Moore. I am a divorce lawyer that is passionate about helping you use the adversity and difficult things in your life to help you grow and show up as the best version of yourself. I am joined today and every day by my producer, Aaron Bender.
Interesting guest on today's episode. You run a family law firm.
I do.
Specializing in divorce.
I do.
Rare is the day when we have a guest talking about divorce.
That's true. Yeah, that's an excellent
I'd have
point.
to look back to see, like, when was the last time we actually talked about divorce or child custody or anything like that? I don't remember.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, she's a custody coach, a non-lawyer custody coach.
I've never even heard of a custody coach before today.
Yeah, it's in this firm in particular, we don't use them a lot.
But you've heard of them.
I've heard, yes.
You came into this hearing of them.
Yes.
When my parents divorced, 35
Did they have a custody coach?
I don't think so. I don't think so. It really wasn't an issue. I don't think custody was an issue. I think it was very amicable divorce.
Really?
It was not the divorce, the separation and things like that. We've talked about before on the show, where that in itself is traumatic, but the divorce did not get contentious or anything like that. So
your parents didn't really fight over you, where you were going to be when?
No. I lived with
amazing.
mom and spent maybe a weekend or two at Dad's. Yeah.
Wow. Was there a court order? Were you required to do that? Did you want to? Is that the time that you
Let
wanted
me search
to spend?
Trellis here. That's the name of the website, right? Trellis? Trellis Law?
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Oh, come on. It's there. Here, now I got to look it up.
What?
Hold on. Trellis Law. Yes, I was right. That's the website.
What is it?
It's like a LexisNexis thing.
Oh, where you can look up every single court
I
order?
think so, yes.
What? How do you even know about this? Welcome to the future of legal intelligence. Interesting.
Hold on.
In case the people watching are like, what is Holly looking at? Why is she saying that? I can see what you're searching on your computer. I can see it on the monitor.
Bender, 1987.
Bender versus Bender. Did it come up?
Something did.
Well, I don't think it's your Bender.
No, it might be.
What?
Yeah. Divorce proceedings, that's 1984. 1976. This was late 80s. Interesting.
Wow. You taught me something new today. I did not know about this. Trellis. Maybe Trellis could sponsor us.
Sponsor a podcast that rarely talks about the law.
Because we talk about, I don't want to say much more amazing things, but
we do.
We talk about better things.
Law just happens to be never mind. I'm cutting all this out. Bye.
We are joined today by Reneé Rodriguez. She helps parents in custody battles. Renee, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. Now, you are not a lawyer, correct?
That is correct. I'm a consultant and a coach and a certified VAW advocate, violence against women.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about how you came to start helping parents in custody battles.
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, Holly, it really starts with my own story. I'm someone who did suffer an abusive relationship. It was the type of thing where you have a lot of coercive control and not so much of the physical type of abuse. And so it becomes the question of, am I being abused? How can I fix this? That type of thing. And when I went through that, it got worse when I became pregnant. So after I was pregnant, after I had our child and things really came to a head, I realized I needed to get out. And when I got out and started talking to lawyers, I realized that I needed more to show what was really going on. I have a background in strategy, and so I ended up getting a coach. I ended up kind of going through some of my own pieces of my own battle, but then we reached the point of getting to a forensic evaluation. And once I got to that point, my divorce coach, who was actually Tina Swithin, the head of the One Mom's Battle movement, she said, I don't have a lot of experience with evaluations. Can you just put something together? Let me see if I can get some help. But you're a strategist. See what you can put together. I went back. I put together some templates that I created, and I brought them to her. And she said, I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen abuse laid out so clearly. And that's really sort of where I started. She thought I should be a coach. I started to look into that. And after I finished my own custody battle, I moved into that field.
Okay. And from what I know about you, you do, I don't know if specialize is the right word. You can correct me if that's incorrect, but you do specialize in custody battles that are fought against a narcissist. Is that correct?
Yes, very much so. We're really dealing a lot with the coercive control. The physical abuse comes into it as well. But a lot of the psychological abuses are, heaped upon abuse victims by people who have narcissistic personality disorder. I think there's really a difference to be talked about here, because when we talk about narcissism, in truth, we're actually all on a narcissism spectrum. We wouldn't be able to have goals. We wouldn't be able to do anything, without being somewhere in a healthy place on that spectrum.
I feel like narcissist is the new black. So I'm glad that you brought this up, because what I wanted to ask you about is I feel like narcissism is definitely a buzzword in our society today. And
it is.
And what I know is really true narcissistic personality disorder affects maybe 1 to 2% of the American population. So, but I think we are all actually being socialized into becoming more narcissistic every day. So when you talk about a narcissist, I mean, are you talking about people that actually have been diagnosed with the disorder, or are you talking about something different?
Well, I'm talking about someone who does have narcissistic personality disorder, but I'm really glad you bring up whether or not they're diagnosed with it, because it's very hard to diagnose somebody who won't see a therapist, who won't see somebody who can diagnose them. Usually when someone has NPD, they are perfect. They don't need help from anybody. So there's not really any accessibility to be able to get that diagnosis. But it's interesting because, the internet, 10 years ago, this wasn't true. But now you can go onto the internet. It's like you're saying, it's such a part of the zeitgeist that it's one of those things where you can sort of see the checklist. Right. And there are some things that are pretty easy to see whether or not it's there. And NPD is something that, if you go onto a website and your partner is checking those boxes, then it's better to just assume there's NPD here and run.
Okay. Do you think NPD affects one gender more than the other?
That's a really good question. I can't speak to that. What I can speak to is that when it comes to the statistics for who is abused, 85% of abuse victims are female. Out of the 10 to 15% of domestic violence abuse victims who are male, 49% of them have a male perpetrator. It is their male partner, and 48% of them have a female perpetrator. So when we are looking at who is perpetrating this particular type of abuse, narcissistic abuse, it is largely male. Whether or not that's correlation or causality, I cannot speak to that.
Okay. And do you have any information or, statistics on why that is? I mean, is it just simply the biological and physical nature of men versus women? Men are biologically, bigger, faster, stronger, and therefore potentially more capable of abuse to a weaker, smaller, slower victim? Or do you have any data on why it is that it does affect more women than men?
I think that's a big piece of it. I think we've got toxic masculinity. It's really patriarchy. I know we like to use that word, but if we really want to apply it here, it works. We've got a system set up where, if you look at the family court system as an example, its construct is patriarchal, right? And that can hail back to a million things. If we pick one small example, women still take on the man's last name. And if we look back at the history of that, the reason that women first took on the man's name was because of women being property, being seen as property. Women and children are in many ways still seen as property. And so there are a lot of these smaller and larger ways that we can see that there's a complete imbalance in the power dynamic. We see it in court, we see it in relationships. And I think it does very much have to do with women being the weaker sex. You talk about the physical, attributes. I agree with all of that. As unpopular as that might be, I think it is true.
Yeah. Now, there would be a lot of people that say the family court system is biased in favor of women. Women, it's much easier for a woman to get custody of children. It's much easier for a woman to, quote unquote, win in family court. What is your opinion of that? Do you agree with that? Do you disagree with that?
Well, Barry Goldstein and Dr. Mohana had taken a look at this, and they found that over 70% of the time that the bias is actually against women. And now we have some movements, we have some litigation, we have, last I counted, we had 8 states that have a 50-50 presumption when it comes to custody. Right off the bat, we're just going to assume that it's 50-50. It doesn't matter if the child is used to having a primary caregiver who they see every day. Now we're going to rip those children away from the other parent in the spirit of fairness to the parent who wasn't participating as much before.
Well, it's a presumption, though. Presumptions can be rebutted. So we're not ripping children away unless, if you rebut the presumption by showing that it wouldn't be in the children's best interest, right? It's not automatically ripping them away. Would you agree with that?
I think that this is a good discussion for us to have, because I would agree with you up to a point. Unfortunately, the experience that I'm having and what we're seeing is that it's very much a real fight in order to challenge that presumption. When we talk to colleagues who are lawyers and judges and that type of thing, the general sentiment that we're finding, and I don't know, what the sentiment is that you're finding in your circles, but there's a lot of wanting it to be 50-50. There's an ease in that. When we have parents, whether they're male or female, who are proving that there is dysfunction or abuse or anything worse, that abuse is something that is doubted before it is trusted. And I feel like that is something that is problematic. If we have abuse in a marriage, are we really keeping proof while we're married with somebody? No, not so much. Is it possible that there is proof? Sure, of course. But then we have post-separation abuse. We have things that are going on afterwards. And what we find is that a lot of times people like to attribute the post-separation abuse to just someone who's angry about the marriage, right? This isn't actual abuse. It isn't coming out more. It's just that they're angry about the marriage. So we see a lot of things that are playing into it that does make it hard to push against that presumption.
Okay. In your experience, how rare or common is it for a person to use a claim of abuse as manipulation, strategy, something like that?
Studies have shown that 99% of abuse allegations are meant to be in earnest. The same statistic actually is applied 98 or 99% based on the year for sexual abuse. If we look at sexual abuse, for example, if 99% of sexual abuse allegations are made in earnest, then how many of those actually turn out to be sexual abuse? Well, we find that out of those, 75% of it, there is sexual abuse, and the other 25% of that is, look, something was happening. Something needed to be investigated. And it wasn't meant to get a leg up in custody so much as protect the children. It's hard, though, because what we have is a compassion dissonance, which means that it's hard for any human being to believe that the lovely person that they see in front of them is capable of something like sexual abuse. So I think we're very quick to villainize, the judges and the lawyers. And I think that part of it is that it's very hard to digest that a child could be going through this. So when we look at, how do we prove sexual abuse as the example we're using now, it becomes very, very difficult because people want to be very, very sure, because now we've got a rock and a hard place. We want to protect the child, but we don't want to take a child away from a potentially loving parent, right? So which side do we go on? I think, protecting the child is where most people would go, but we do have a lot that we have to look at there. And so for us, what we do is we're looking very hard at the evidence and helping people to partner better with their lawyers and be clearer communicators with their lawyers so that their lawyers can stand up for them and with them to say, here's what we do have, here's what we can show.
Right. So yeah, this is a great time to, because I think we've highlighted certainly some of the issues that, are ongoing in the system, in the family court system and in family dynamics. So let's talk more about how you address those issues. What does your work actually do for a woman? Because do you only help women, or do you also help men as well in custody battles?
We do help men as well. The majority, following the DV statistics, the majority of our clients are female. But yes, we help both genders.
Okay. So give us some real life, like practical application of how you help your clients.
Yeah, sure. I built a methodology based out of the templates that I was starting to create from my own battle.
Right.
And when I was done with my battle, my coach was starting to spread those around like crazy, and people were asking for them from me. People were asking for more. And I realized that I could take my strategy background and basically apply it to the A to Z of this. Mm-hmm. And when I looked at it, I realized that there's really 3 pillars to what we created, which we call the custody blueprint. We were jokingly calling it that, and then we realized that everybody was calling it that. So we just kind of kept with that name. It really comes down to evidence, mindset, and strategy.
Okay.
Right? So what we're doing is we're taking what people have when they come in, we say, hi, tell us about your case. And we figure out, what is it you've done so far? How is it you've been working with your lawyer? And so mindset is one of the biggest things that we work with people on, because the court persona is so important. We can, help determine what kind of evidence you should put before your lawyer until we're blue in the face. We can help you figure out a strategy from my strategy background, of course. But if you walk into court, if you're talking to a guardian ad litem or AFC or, minors counsel, if you are talking to the evaluator and you're shooting yourself in the foot, then none of that is worth anything. So all 3 of those things have to come together. And when we do the mindset piece, we're really focusing on what is that court persona. And when we're addressing people with this, the way we talk about it is, look, whether you are out for margaritas with the girls, whether you are at church, at a parent-teacher conference, at a job interview, leading your team at work, you have a different persona for each of those things.
Right. It's not necessarily being
fake.
High
level of authenticity. Right. Very high level of authenticity. Create an authentic court persona that goes against the narrative that the other side has. Right. So we help them do that. The other 2 pieces of it are, you have to get your anxiety and your trauma under control as best you can, given the fact that you're also in a court battle and suffering post-separation abuse.
Right.
So we have a bunch of resources. We have a certified trauma recovery coach that comes in, and we're not giving therapy, but what we are is we're looking at what kind of tools can we give you to calm you down so that when you're talking to your lawyer, when you are talking to professionals, when you're on the stand, you're at your best. And then we help them be able to talk about their parenting. We know that the court is not a fan of permissive or authoritarian. So we look at what they're doing. We help them talk about, how are you the consummate authoritative parent? Can you talk about that parenting? What are you doing that's not so great? Here are some resources to get you to a place that we know the court likes to see and that we know is good parenting as well. That's the easy piece, because our clients are across the board just good parents, right? So it's more about just be able to talk about it, just be able to toot your own horn.
Yeah.
When we get to the evidence piece, it's really such a favor to lawyers, because we have so many, we partner with a lot of lawyers, and what we hear is they're just exhausted, right? Because there's emails coming in, he's late again, he did this, he's bad-mouthing me to the kids. Will this work? Will this piece of evidence work? What about this? What about this? What about this? He's 15 minutes late. And we say, bring that to us. let us look at what your lawyer really should be looking at. And we're going to err on the side of caution. If we think it's a yes, it's got to go to your lawyer. If we think it's a maybe, it's got to go to your lawyer, right? But if it's an absolute no, we know for a fact that nobody is ever going to be able to use this. You've got to let it go. And you've got to focus strategically on what you're going after. You have to categorize it, or we're working with a lawyer who likes to call it buckets. But you need to narrow down. We narrow down what, generally speaking, works well in court. Right? We know that these are the things the court cares about. We know that these things fit your statutes or the laws in your province. We know what they're looking for. Please furnish your lawyers with this stuff, and try to hold back on the stuff that is going to muddy the waters and not allow your lawyer to see the path forward. Right?
Yeah, I can see how helping them. Yeah, I could see how it would be very valuable to the lawyer and the client, the lawyer to have sort of like an outside filtering system for what evidence is coming in, and then probably to the client too, to save on attorney's fees. I could see how that would be valuable to both.
I think so. And then, of course, I come in once they've gone through. So the custody blueprint, we work with them for 9 weeks, and we do it piece by piece. In 9 weeks, we help them build their case. By the time they're at their 5th or 6th week, they're ready for me to come in with my strategy brain and say, these are the pathways that I believe that you should present to your lawyer. And generally speaking, lawyers are very happy to be able to see this client has been forced to think through things. Right. This client has decided what they're willing to stand behind versus parachute out once it gets really hard. Right. So we're helping with that support, and we're helping the client think, and we're helping the client really be able to deliver their thoughts in a way that will help move their case forward to be clear, instead of, as I've said, constantly muddying the waters, because it's trauma. So of course they're going to be muddying the waters. Of course.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I would think with the work that you do, managing the trauma and managing the emotions is probably one of the most challenging aspects of it. Would you agree with that?
Very much so. Yeah, I think it gets in the way, and we do hear a lot of lawyers and therapists say it's hard to. It's like you're trying to get through the weeds of the trauma that the abuser has not only left behind, but keeps starting over and over again. I mean, look, let's say it's moms, since that's the majority. These moms have finally found a way out, because it's not about being brave enough to leave. I think there's bravery in staying and bravery in leaving. So I don't want to stigmatize staying and leaving. There are a lot of good reasons to stay. Sometimes it actually is safer. Sometimes they're creating, a buffer for the children. Sometimes they've been so financially abused they have no choice because they have no money, right?
Right.
So whether or not you've stayed or you've left, a big piece of what we're looking at is, how can we take a look at the post-separation abuse? How can you handle that? What are the tools you need to be able to handle that, but also be able to build your case in a powerhouse way that you can hand off to your lawyer and give them what they're really, really looking for in order to increase your chances in court.
Right. Okay. So in moving a little bit more to practical aspects that parents could actually take in and potentially implement, what is your advice for parents who find themselves in this situation to minimize any damage to the kids? What can they do?
Yeah, I think I've got an unpopular answer for that. And that is that I think from everything we've seen, we at the company are great believers in keeping children in the dark. There's really no reason to get them involved as much as people do, and it's hard, but the less they know that you're going off to court, the less anxious they are, the less that, it starts to become bad mouthing from the other side. The less it starts to become accidental bad mouthing on your own side. I mean, we're all very tempted to protect our children from the abuser and from their charms. And so unfortunately, some of what is said is misconstrued as parental alienation. We're very, very quick to label things alienation that are not, and to take abuse as something that's just anger or dissatisfaction, right? And so I think I'm not a big fan of having the children involved in the case any more than they have to be. Another thing is that, when children come back from a household that has a narcissist, an abuser, they're highly dysregulated. And so what we try to tell parents is when your kiddo is coming back from the other household, the number one thing to do is to meet them where they're at. It may not be the day to get tickets to Sesame Street on ice, right? Even if it's the one time that it's playing and your kiddo has been looking forward to it. What we hear from our clients is that anything that they plan on these days that they're coming back dysregulated is just a disaster. What we hear a lot of is that kids, honestly, just even kids who are tweens and teens, they'll sit on the couch next to you and lean against you. This is when they need that skin to skin contact, right? They throw their legs over your legs on the couch. They're near you. They're studying in the kitchen while you're cooking instead of where they usually do. These are signals that they need to regulate. And so when you see these things that are a little bit outside the norm and are usually on transition day, I think it's best to welcome it and let it be low key and let the kids regulate. That actually helps them strengthen their nervous systems quite a bit, right?
Okay.
So and then
I just want to touch on that really quick, because I'm really interested in maybe you could educate me on this. So when we do that for our kids, where now they're coming home from the other parent's house, they're dysregulated, or really they're coming from any type of similar situation where they're coming into your space, with a dysregulated nervous system. And we, in order to, serve them in the way that we think is best, we cancel all the plans, we sit on the couch with them, we let them snuggle up to us. How does that child transition to adulthood where they may have to go to work feeling dysregulated? They have obligations. They have children of their own that they're going to have to do that for. How do we as parents teach them those things if we're sort of always, meeting them where they are?
Mm-hmm. Well, so this has a bit to do with the formation of the prefrontal cortex, which is where security is lodged, right? If you never have secure attachments, then you never learn how to be secure on your own. So it feels a little bit counterintuitive. Our certified trauma recovery coach talks about this beautifully, so I'm going to try to steal some of her wording for this. Okay. She talks about the fact that as long as our sympathetic nervous system has a good working parasympathetic nervous system, and then we bring polyvagal theory into it, then these simple actions of just being there for your child, the simple skin on skin touch, or just being near them until they're ready to walk away from the kitchen table and go someplace else, move away from you on the couch, because they will. Yes. This is their way of getting that security in their prefrontal cortex, which helps the formation of the prefrontal cortex. Okay. So I think that sometimes this could be seen as coddling, right?
Right.
But
yes.
It's just, these are not moments that are going to go on for hours. We have clients say they're good after about 45 minutes. We have some clients say they're good after about 2 or 3 days. And we do see this is different with age. If we were to go across the board, the younger kids, it's going to take them 1, 2, sometimes even 3 days to get back to their normal selves, right? To feel regulated.
Yeah, and whereas then they're going to go right back to the other parent's house again. This is what I hear a lot from clients is problem. Yes. Yeah. Just about the time they're back to, symbiosis, they're back to the other parent's house. Yeah.
That's right. And that is part of it. And so, and I'd love to direct your, audience members to Dr. Christine Colciola. Christine is brilliant at talking about the fact that parents of children who are coming from a household of coercive control, for example, you have to unfortunately be more than just a parent. You really have to be a counselor as well. And that kind of plays into what you're talking about. What is that cross between holding them when they need to be held? There's nothing wrong with that. Versus, okay, Now, this is the moment. This is the moment to help them with their own coping mechanisms. And that was the third thing I was going to offer people for their children in custody battle, which is to say, get them a therapist who is certified in trauma therapy. Certified in trauma therapy. For adults, and if they have someone who's certified in trauma therapy, that's going to be about a 6-month of course of trauma therapy. For children, it's going to be about 8 to 12, 14 months, right? Because it's done slowly. It's a way for them to learn coping mechanisms, to learn how to use their voice, to learn how to trust what they know is true versus buy into any sort of gaslighting. Right. So they start to learn. So it's really a combination of things that we try to have our clients adopt in as much as they can find these resources in therapy deserts or, having the money for people who are so specialized. It's possible, but it's not easy. But it is worth trying to find.
Yeah. Okay. And then another thing I did want to go back to and revisit is I know that you're a big fan of keeping the kids out of the court process as much as possible, and you feel that's what's most beneficial for them. But I do know there's a school of thought, particularly by Dr. Philip Stahl. I've used him on an expert in my custody cases multiple times. He wrote a book about high conflict parenting. And in his book, what he says is a mistake that parents often make is not talking enough to the kids about the divorce. I think what he's referring to, though, is more so, family dynamics, not necessarily like court proceedings, like I have court today, I'm talking to my lawyer, those types of things. So I just wanted you to maybe clarify or explain to me, like, do you disagree with Dr. Stahl on that? Or is it one thing is talking about the court proceeding itself, and then it's quite another thing to talk about, okay, the family dynamics are going to be changing and talk about that stuff with the kids more freely?
I agree with Dr. Stahl. I think it's about helping the children make the adjustments. And, he goes through, you want to talk about, here's what home is going to be like. You want to help them form that. You want to listen to them. You want to figure that out. It's the court proceedings and the nastiness and that type of thing that I think you do want to shield them from. And I would still maintain that we're off to court today is not something that is great for
helpful.
Kids. They don't need to know the court dates. It's the anxiety level is already there. And we're also trying to, and I think that, what Dr. Stahl talks about, and many others, of course, fit into this, which is that we want to be careful of adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, right? Kaiser has a huge study that they did, longitudinal, where we were able to see what happens to adults depending on their ACE score, and I would invite anyone, they've made it so easy. You can go online and you can take a test for your ACEs, for your adverse childhood experiences. You can take it for your children as well. And you can determine, what is that ACE score? And really, it's easy for it to be high when someone's going through a divorce, going through a custody battle with an abusive co-parent, right? And what we're finding, what Kaiser found, was that it actually affects almost every aspect of a person's life, depending on what that score was, of their adult life, including the illnesses they'll get, the careers they'll never be able to pursue, their ability to hold down a relationship, their ability to function in society is based on that ACE score. Can it be overcome? Yes. This is why I like Christine Cocciola's work. The way that she talks about parenting and overcoming that is a wonderful way of trying to get at, just chip away at those ACEs and make things better. And her methodology and similar methodologies are exactly what Kaiser talks about, can overcome these problems that we have with ACEs, although obviously it's better to avoid having any ACEs at all.
So, and I don't mean to keep playing devil's advocate. I don't know, maybe I do. But
I like that kind of thing.
I would say I've never met a successful person in my life or, have read a successful person's book or, looked at them from afar where they didn't have a lot of adversity that they overcame. And I would say in my own life, I had some pretty traumatic childhood experiences. And I would say it was because of those experiences that I have the career I have, that I've done what I've done, that I've had any sort of success that I have any sort of self-awareness, coping mechanisms, parenting abilities, you name it. It was actually because of those traumatic experiences. So is it the traumatic experiences themselves that become such a barrier to, let's just call it, high functioning adults or success in life? Or is it how the person copes with them or learns to overcome them that is actually the issue here?
I don't think that is devil's advocate. I think that's exactly it. That's exactly what they talk about with the ACEs study, is that it can be overcome. When we're overcoming things, we're not able to just lift them away. We have to teach coping mechanisms.
Right, but if the goal is to remove every single, adversarial experience, I mean, that to me, I'm like, I can't think of a worse goal, because that's what creates character. That's what creates extraordinary people. So if our goal is to remove every single traumatic experience, in my opinion, and you are much more the expert on the topic than I am, but just looking from life experience and the little bit of information I have, to me, that sounds like we're just going to end up with a society of people that cannot cope with anything. If they've never had to cope with anything in their life, they haven't had any practice at coping with things. And that creates a society of very low functioning adults.
I see where you're coming from. Here's what I would say to kind of clarify where I'm coming from. When we look at our set of clients, for example, at any given time, we've got clients who come in the door and they are just gangbusters for, I want to protect my kids, help me out, I'm smart, I've got this. And then we've got clients who we are holding them almost every single day. Their experiences could be similar, they could be very different. We've had clients who have videos of assaults that I actually won't even look at anymore. I have other people who come in, the project managers are looking at some of these things, right? So and then they'll sound like they're CEO of their own company. And then we'll have people who have suffered different kinds of abuse and they can barely speak. So I think it's a little bit more complex. What I'm finding is that some people are able to get those coping mechanisms and some people are broken. They're absolutely broken by what's happening to them. Now, will they become stronger for it? I agree with you on that. I believe we become stronger if we are able to overcome it. And I don't think it's a personal weakness if you're not. I think it depends on your upbringing, and I think it depends on your resources. Would it be better for you? Excuse me, I'm going to take my fur baby down. Would it be better for you, meaning, a client who is going through something, to sort of face something and just get over it? Or do they need to go through the recovery they need to go through? It really honestly depends. I mean, look, I don't speak much about everything that happened to me, but it was the darkest period of my life. And now I'm running a company where we have a 90% success rate, where people come in and basically say, this is the custody I want for my kids. Help me achieve it. Right? But then we have people who, it's just hard to get up every morning. Well, listen, pretty much everybody who works for me has been through, some of my coaches have been through things that are worse than what I've been through. And there's a period where none of us are able to get up in the morning. That point where you start to be able to get up in the morning, I think, is where you start to get stronger. But I still would never wish what happened to me or any of my clients on anybody, because the horrors of domestic violence, I think, they particularly break people down. They really do. When it comes to gaslighting, narcissistic abuse feels to me particularly insidious. There's interesting research that shows, which I find interesting to look at, I find it to be controversial, that psychological abuse has far more wear and tear than just physical abuse. That what a fascinating thing for researchers to have discovered, that the long-term effects of psychological abuse is severely beyond physical abuse. That's an incredible thing for researchers to have discovered. So I think it's a great debate. I think it's a great topic, and I think it is something that we need to discuss. But I think I still think Here's what we do know, though. Look, the more ACEs that these children go through, we see differences in their brain scans, right?
Mm-hmm.
We see that the possibility of them growing up to be either a narcissist or a victim skyrocket. So
Okay.
if we can help them, if we can help them learn coping skills, if we can be there for them and show them that not everyone in the world will treat them this way, that there is a normalcy in the world and that that's not it, because kids will normalize their parents no matter how their parents
Yes.
treat them.
Right.
So if we have a parent who is saying this is the way to be treated and this is the way to treat people, I think that is the better path, I would personally argue.
Okay. So this is interesting. I'm trying to decide if I want to ask you this question or I don't. But but I've never been one to shy away from a good hard question. Because as you know, as you're speaking here today, and you're clearly very knowledgeable on, all things in this arena. And it seems like the work that you're doing is extremely valuable to, a fairly large group of people. And I think as time goes on, like the group of people that you are able to help is going to become bigger and bigger, I think, because I think, are feeling more free to report this type of abuse, right? It's becoming a little bit less stigmatized. I mean, there's still work to do there. But so anyway, the work that you do is very valuable. The group that you help needs your work. You're clearly very knowledgeable about it. People are benefiting massively from it. But for the tragedy, the horrific experiences that you yourself endured, I would venture to say you wouldn't be doing this work. So if you had to do it again, I mean, would you take those experiences away? Or is there some part of you that was like, okay, I get it now. Like I had to go through that to do the work that I'm doing now, which is in turn going to help so many people and possibly change not only the people that you're helping's lives, but their children, and potentially affect generations to come.
I would start my answer by first saying, this is my answer. This is my answer.
Yes,
and my
of
answer
course.
is, for two reasons, I would say, yes, I would go through it again. The first is, because I became a mother and I can't, the child who came out of that is worth it. It shouldn't have to be this way. And I want to make it very, very clear.
Right.
The other thing I would say is that we never know, I think, when we're going to hit rock bottom and what that's going to look like for us. And this may be at the root, perhaps, of what you've been beautifully getting at as we've been talking, which is to say, sometimes something's not going to resolve itself until you've hit rock bottom. And I think I was hurt so badly, I was abused so severely, that I suddenly realized that I had been living a lifetime of not using my voice, that I had been living a lifetime of not being able to function as fully as I could for whatever reason I won't talk about here. But that is what led me to seek excellent recovery methods and pathways, and has led me to address what I didn't know needed to be addressed. And I want to be very, very clear that what I'm saying now is not my way of saying that if you've been abused, then it must be your fault. Abuse,
of course,
shouldn't happen.
And I join you in that sentiment. Yes.
Yeah. I don't care what my deal was. At no point did anyone have the right to treat me the way that some people did, but it did get worse and worse. I was, in long-term relationships with people I just should not have been in with. Why? When you look at, and I think, and I want to say this, we're talking about a childhood where I was top of the honor roll and top of the dean's list and winning awards, and then winning awards in college, and then the chosen one for this, and advancing in my career quickly. and, just against all odds for everything. And yet what was going on inside apparently was broken enough to choose romantic partners who I should not have. And that, to me, when I look back, is fascinating in and of itself. That persona, that person who was succeeding on the outside was struggling on the inside, right? And so going through it the way I did and having to fight in the way that I did led me to the right resources to understand how to address where I needed to go to make sure that I was able to use my voice and do all the things that I just spoke about. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've had, a person on the podcast that practices stoicism, and I go back to one of the principles that he talked about so often, which is amor fati, the love of one's fate, which is really, having an appreciation for all the experiences in your life that you've gone through so far, because they led you to where you are today, no matter how painful, tragic, difficult, all those things. But I personally believe they're all part of a person's journey. And, I believe that we're all made for more. And, that's why I named the podcast Made for More, because, you can use those adversarial experiences to do extraordinary things, which you have clearly done. So, Renee, I hopefully my questions weren't too tough on you, but I appreciate the work that you're doing, and I appreciate, you taking the time to talk to me.
No, Holly, I thought this was a great discussion. So thank you for having me. Thank you for both of our bravery and having this discussion.
I've got just a little bit more to say. In an ideal world, we would all love to either avoid and or remove any sort of adversarial experiences from our life, from our kids' lives, from our lives, from our childhood. But in fact, those are the experiences that actually make us who we are. Those are what teach us how to cope and how to overcome. And oftentimes, in my own experience, they actually prepare people to do absolutely extraordinary things. And the reality is we can't remove them. We can't avoid them no matter how hard we try. So I would encourage you to take the painful experiences of your life and do something extraordinary with them, because you were made for more.